Mhm.
Welcome. Welcome with peace and prayer and hope and love. Lori Cardona. I'm here with Linda Pazos. Hi, Linda.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Lori. Thanks
Hi.
for being back.
Of course, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. This is Miracles with a Twist, where we take a look at spiritual concepts specifically related to A Course in Miracles, and we bring in other ideas, such as, with Linda and I, emotional healing, holy relationships, the things that we need to do so we can rise higher in our personal relationships. And many of you know Marianne Williamson. She always says that to have a holy relationship, you have to realize that all relationships are like laboratories. And we are in that laboratory practicing what we preach, practicing what we've learned, practicing what we've read. We're being put to the test at the times when we feel most vulnerable. And those are some of the things we're going to talk about today, because if we want to integrate what we've learned, we have to be responsible and accountable, and we have to be all those C's we've talked about before. But I'm going to let Linda give us a little review and tell us what we're up to today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And it's nice to be back. It's been a while.
It has. We missed a month.
We had such great conversation. And we said, oh, let's do another podcast.
Yeah.
So let's just take a second to review a little bit. You know,
Okay.
we started this podcast in conversations, and the very first one was a word that you made up about self-abandonment in relationships.
I did.
And, yeah, remember? And that gets into the importance of self-love, having compassion and forgiveness for self. The next one, I think, moved into discussing the C's: commitment, chemistry, compatibility, communication, and celebrations. Then we included some love languages, and those love languages by Derek Hart that take more time. So today we're following the same kind of trend, but we're going to dig a little deeper about emotional accountability, responsibility, and, you know, coming to terms with ourselves and the choices that we have made or make with self-compassion and understanding. We were doing the best we can at the time, and self-forgiveness, being at peace with our past. So those parts of it, and emotional responsibility and accountability, we're going to take a little deeper today. Specifically, when in partnership, you know, it could be work, family, friends, but especially in romantic relationships. So we go back to the types of 3 C's, you know, compatibility, common, which includes common interests, hobbies, you know, some same culture. And then, of course, you have to have chemistry, which includes some kind of attraction. You know, you get each other's sense of humor, you like being around each other, you would hope. And the most important attachment states and vision, which is the emotional intimacy where 2 people co-create a certain lifestyle, sexual incompatibility, and because relationships are not just about love. Actually, love is not enough.
Well, there's a challenge right there that we need to talk about tonight. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of strength and courage and vulnerability. It reminds me of a quote from the Taoist tradition by Lao Tse. You may have heard of it, where he said that being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, but loving someone deeply gives you courage, because it takes courage to love deeply. And so love is made up of all the necessary ingredients that we've been talking about in all our previous podcasts, which reminds me that if anybody wants to see any of those, they can just scroll down. We're going to be dropping this in the Miracles with a Twist playlist in Rev Lori Cardona's channel, / Miracles with a Twist. And all our podcasts are on there, including the ones, all 1 through 4 that we've done before. And so we've been talking about, to have a truly emotional, healthy relationship and a compatible, loving, holy relationship, because we want to bring the spiritual aspect into it too. We have to have all those C's right? The chemistry, compatibility, the shared vision. And that also includes being kind to each other, compassionate, understanding, really listening from our hearts, and rising to this place where we can truly accept and have space for another person. And I was telling you the story, but I couldn't remember the name of a guy, but there was some guy that I was listening to on a video who said that there's billions of people in the world. And he said, and I chose this one person, my wife, and she chose me. And out of all these people, we've come together to love each other. Why would we want to hurt each other? And so that's why we need to heal all of the things of our past, so we don't take those things out on each other, and to bring this higher level of love into each relationship, because we are responsible for what we bring to another person. And that's what he said. I am responsible for the safety of her heart. And I love that, because it includes all the ingredients of love that we've been discussing.
It really does. That's so sweet. It is.
Yeah.
You know, and out of all these millions of people, I chose you. I chose this person. Why would I not want to guard their heart in a safe way? Yeah, that's sweet. Well, that's why when in relationships, it's essential really to have a shared vision and commitment to each other. I think that's something, you know, when making discerning decisions, if you want to be with somebody, for example, or even if you are in a relationship and you want to go back and make sure it's continuing on a good, healthy way. And you and I have recently been discussing a book, the book Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson, which became a segue into what is love and how are we showing up and being responsible and accountable to each other in the relationship. So hold me tight.
Yeah, I love that book. I have it also. The subtitle is 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. And
Right.
I happen to follow a guy on Instagram. His Instagram page is Jimmy on Relationships. And he does these little scenarios where he plays himself and his wife and the different ways that they could communicate versus how they did. And he attributes the healing of his relationship with his wife to Sue Johnson, because
Really?
he followed her advice and he became very popular. He still is very popular. And because of that, he was able to meet her this year and did an interview with her just right before she passed away. Unfortunately, she passed away earlier last year.
It was meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to look at it. Jimmy on Relationships.
Jimmy on Relationships on Instagram.
A little bit more about Sue Johnson. You know, in the 1980s, she found that her sessions with couples seemed to swing somewhere between emotional chaos and total silence. And so she started to research for a map about the dramas that were causing that silence and chaos. And they played out in her office, and she felt that she needed to take couples beyond just communication skills. While it's important, she realized they weren't gaining anything, that it wasn't helping anything. She had to get beyond that. So it did, you know, because communication skills just didn't get to solve the issue. So she started to spend hours and hours watching the interaction on tape between the couples during that she had taken during session, in order to understand the drama, the emotions of what she called love going wrong.
Wow.
She realized she had to help couples see their negative patterns of interaction that were driven by emotions, and to see that as the enemy, not each other. And she called that interaction a demon dialogue.
Oh, demon dialogue. Well, that
Experience.
very intense. There's a line in A Course in Miracles about communication, and I like it so much. It's somewhat, I find it to be somewhat romantic in a way. It says, in your holy relationship, it's lovely in its innocence, mighty in its strength, and blazing with a light far brighter than the sun in the sky that you can see. And it reminds me of when I do wedding ceremonies. A lot of times within the ceremony, they want some kind of a ritual. And there is a ritual where each partner brings a lit candle And together they light a center candle and create a brighter light. And that's not the dimming of either one's light, but the creation of a greater, brighter light. And that's why relationships are so essential to our emotional and spiritual growth. And I take that to mean that every time we speak to each other, there's an opportunity to love each other deeply. There's another line that says, you speak two languages at once.
Yeah.
And that causes confusion. If one language means nothing, and the other means everything, the one that means nothing is going to interfere with the one that means everything. So I take that to mean that every time we speak, we can speak with defensiveness, anger, blame, shame, the you guns that we've talked about in the past. Or we can speak from a vulnerable place that is more authentic, and it's more about speaking from a place of calmness, kindness, compassion, and the desire to truly understand that other person, to make sure that person feels safe, which I assume is different than a demon dialogue. So can you explain what that is?
Well, she calls it demon dialogue, rigid types of communication. It's damaging, it's negative, and they're patterns that occur in the relationship when both partners attack each other. Defend and blame to determine who's the bad guy, who's going to be right. And sometimes it's unconscious, when she was working with these couples, trying to get beyond communication skills, they soon were able to see the emotional patterns that were happening in their demon dialogues. And when they were able to be aware and practice recognizing the demon dialogue, the couples were nicer to each other. But then she began realizing nothing changed. And this led her to write her theses, actually, around the dynamic, which finally became what she called emotionally focused therapy, or EFT, which she says are emotions and attachment needs. Now, she doesn't talk about what Thais Gibson talks about, dismissive, avoidant, anxious, but she says we have attachment needs. And what she does in therapy is saying that they're an unconscious plot behind the negative interactions, like the demon dialogues.
Yeah.
And then when a safe connection is lost, it becomes a fight or flight mode. And it's a protest. And we're not realizing it. It's a protest against a disconnection.
Yeah.
And it can only be quieted, she says, by recognizing and accepting each other's attachment protest at the time, and move into a safe space where the couples become emotionally connected again. The emphasis is on the emotions such as anger, fear, sadness, a fear of abandonment, behind the demon dialogues that put them aside. So that's the first thing she started doing with couples, is understand it's not you or them. It's not a we versus them kind of thing, we versus them kind of thing. It's about understanding the emotions that are driven from childhood or parents or being bullied as a child. And like I said, she doesn't talk about attachment styles. She talks about attachment states during the time. And it sounds easy when we're saying it, but the real work, is actually in integrating these ideals and living them daily.
Well, yeah, I think that's a consistent message of everything we've ever spoken of in these, now that our fifth podcast, so the previous four, is about how important it is to not just talk or read or sound really good, in memes or in sound bites, but to truly integrate what we've been learning on an emotional and a spiritual level. So it's not just about talking about any of these things so much as it is about integrating them into our real lives and into our relationships, and how we handle conflict, how we handle difficult times of stress, times of disagreement. It's everything we've ever been talking about in terms of our spiritual life, our emotional healing, all of that. So it could be that these protests and these demon dialogues can be minimized if both people are committed to the goal of holding each other safe and holding each other sinless, provided there's no neglect or abuse or,
Mhm.
you know, big old, what were we calling them? We had a conversation about this recently.
Deal breakers.
Yeah, those relationship deal breakers. You know, I was just, you know, I feel as this is a conversation I had with someone recently. We have this much space in our lives for anything, you know, and deal breakers take up a whole lot of that space. And when someone is verbally abusive or unkind or, you know, constantly reprimanding you, it may not be a real big deal breaker, but it starts to build up, build up, build up until it's like, okay, I can't take it anymore. All of those things need to be looked at if we're not going to teach each other kindly and with compassion and caring. So abuse, neglect, deal breakers, all of those things are the opposite of being committed to a loving, truly loving, mutually respectful, compassionate love life. So it's also a big part of what we've been talking about in all the C's. And how does she assist the couples then in creating this movement toward a more healthy love life?
Well, you know, she says that healthy love is conditional. With two people feeling able to be, you know, to know the patterns as triggered by their emotions. And first and foremost, like that's the accountability and responsibility part of adulting. Uh, yeah, you know, adulting, know your triggers. And then she says there's 3 steps to EFT or emotionally focused therapy. And they're very similar to some of the other things we talked about, you know, with the other therapists, you know, accessibility, we're individually being willing to make sense of our emotions, stepping back from the disconnection and keeping the relation commitment alive. And then she says responsiveness to that accessibility, where we send clear signals of comfort and care to the person who's experiencing a trigger and defining their needs and emotions in a calm, respectful, usually manner. You know, that doesn't always happen. And then engagement. What is this special kind of attention the couples are going to give to their loved ones because of what's going on? And then the practice becomes repeatedly understanding that conversation that they had, being accessible, being responsive to it, and then engaging in it. And that's the practice part of it.
Well, we said we wanted to talk about accountability and self-responsibility. So what are some of the responsibilities of each of the partner as they apply these EFT techniques?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing she does, and they're actually the 7 conversations, and each conversation discusses, you know, is built upon the other. And the first one is, as we said, with recognizing a critical, you know, thing is the demon dialogues and going deeper to figure out and doing your own adulting, you know, what is really being said. So the more I demand, the more you shut down. Once these negative cycles are identified, couples can recognize that trap that puts you in pain and isolation, and they can warn each other, hey, you know, what are we doing here? But they have to be aware first and help each other with that awareness. And after the recognition of the demon, you can imagine how much work and time and practice this is as they were working with her in therapy. You know, she says it's really finding the raw spots. What are the pokes? And you have to work through the healing past trauma. And the drama behind the demon dialogue is all about their emotional attachment and asking yourself, where did it come from? You know, is it a childhood wound? Is it, you know, something that happened in your past? Or is it something that's happening in the relationship? Owning the responsibility by identifying the feelings and attachment fears. I shut down and I avoid. within each other, or I listened to the most vulnerable feelings and I felt lonely and unimportant. So it's finding those raw spots and identifying the feelings behind them too. So now you have the demon dialogues where you're recognizing, okay, what's triggered in me. Now you're saying, okay, what's my raw spot about that one? Oh, I'm afraid, I'm scared. And I'm feeling lonely and dismissed and unimportant. It's not a shame blame. It's explaining to each other. And the next thing, the next part of that or layer is, revisiting the rocky moments. And that's where the practice comes in. You kind of replay those demand loops and acknowledge the steps each person has made and remain in control of the moment. Just emotionally in control, and pause and ask, what am I doing?
Yeah, practicing the pause. That's an important piece.
We've discussed that.
Breath.
Sing the pause. What am I doing? What are you doing? But couples help each other recognize this and have to be open and willing to accept that. It's not an attack. It's like, okay, are we getting back into the pattern? And then couples, are able to curtail the negative patterns that come from the attachment insecurities that way. It takes a lot of emotional healing and maturity, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing she says are three things. You have to be accessible, emotionally responsive, and deeply engaged with each other. What am I most afraid of? What do I need most from you? And she explains that you have to take the elevator all the way down, deep, 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 to discover your attachment priorities at the time. And being able to openly express in a way that invites your partner to come in. And this is the crucial point of the EFT therapy. Yeah. The next conversation, the fifth conversation, is about forgiveness.
Sure.
So once you've done all of this energy, focusing on it and trying to practice it, and the steps, the hurt partner speaks their pain openly and simply. The injuring partner stays emotionally present and acknowledges the pain and their part in it.
Yeah.
If you do not see how you hurt your partner, then how can either one of you feel safe with each other? Right. And that then comes the forgiving by expressing regret and remorse. Then the last two chapters are about, because once and the stories are really loving and tender. And she speaks about couples in her therapy. So they're real life stories and examples of it. So I would recommend the audience, if you want to get it, it's Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson. But the stories are real. And she talks about, couples and their experiences as she led them through this EFT process. She gets them to bonding again. And that could be through sex and touch. Because she said what happens is that good sex is integral, though not paramount, to happy relationships. But it's an integral part of a relationship. It can be.
Yeah.
But sex is the first thing affected for dissatisfied partners. Pure lovers are more in tune to each other. They relax, let go, and immerse themselves into each other. And I think that's the physical, I would say, my own words, not hers, that's the physical release of the forgiveness.
Yes, well said.
Thank you. And then she said she works with couples on, after they've mastered or continuously practiced this model, she works with them on keeping the love alive throughout the relationship. And love is a continuous process. You have to pay attention to it. You have to give it the work it deserves. And, it's a continuous process of seeking, of understanding that you're going to lose emotions, and then you're connecting, reaching out to find them again. So it's that ride that we take as individuals and couples together.
I was saying before about the rituals in wedding ceremonies. And there's been a lot of different religions and cultures and interfaith and intercultural marriage ceremonies I perform. And when it's a Christian ceremony, they often ask me to read from Corinthians, which you might be familiar with, where it says, love is patient, love is kind. And it says a lot of other stuff, but there's another section of that. When you referred to adulting, it reminded me of it. So love is patient, love is kind, but it also says, when I was a child, I played with childish toys, but now I'm grown and I can do grown things. And of all the things that I can do, the greatest of these is love.
Aw.
Yeah, I love that part. Yeah.
I do too. I do too.
Mhm.
And that's the underlining emphasis in her book. It's in each of the conversations, the couples mutually, it's not one and not the other, it's together, mutually share the willingness to be accountable and take responsibility for themselves and their relationship success. Because without the foundational love that these couples have created, and the willingness, these conversations would not have worked, and the couples would not have rekindled that love that they had and strengthened their connections to form a lifetime of a caring, healthy relationship. I heard a saying from one of the books I'm reading recently. It's love motivates each partner to become more aware and self-responsible.
I love that. I love that. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Conscious girlfriend.
Yeah. I know.
You are presently in a relationship. So
Yeah.
how does this work for you?
Well, it's all the things we've been speaking of in all our podcasts, right? All the C's. We've got all the C's, the initial 3 C's, and then all the extra C's that we've added on over and over through all the podcasts. Again, if you want to see them, if you haven't, you can go back and find them underneath this on the page in the YouTube channel. But also we each have our dedication to emotional healing. We've done a lot of work and continue to do work therapeutically. And we have our spiritual practices. It's Kabbalah meets A Course in Miracles. We're both dedicated to, again, not just reading, not just learning, but applying and integrating those healings, emotional and spiritual aspects of our lives that are very, very important to both of us. And but that's not to say that there haven't been triggers. It's how we've handled the triggers, and it's about there's been no blame, shame. There's been no trashing, no flight, no fight. It's been really deep, true connection and conversation and accountability and responsibility and listening. And well, it's refreshing. It's refreshing because it's like we both are like, wow, after the fact, like that's not familiar, this really new way of being. It's because we're integrating what we've learned and what we've been committed to, and we're bringing that to the table. So I love that quote, that Ruth Schwartz quote, because it says that it's right on around regarding what is truly essential, that love is motivating us to be more self-aware and more accountable and responsible. I hope to live that forever, and not just in my partnership, but in all ways of connecting with people.
Yeah, true. Well, thank you for sharing that story. That might be a good place, maybe to wrap it up for this podcast. What do you think?
Oh, okay. But we're never done. So we'll just say this is number 5 of who knows. It's an endless series. But yeah, we can wrap it up. And thank you so much. Do you remember a couple of podcasts ago, we had one, I think it might have been the one in July, that was A Course in Miracles and Self-Love, where I ended with a quote by Frida Kahlo, who I love very much. Her readings, her diary, a lot of her essays and her thoughts are in a diary that was published. But she was a painter. She was an amazing painter, but she was also an essayist and a poet. And so she said, in the end, I believe that we don't need to do anything to be loved. We need to spend our lives. We don't need to spend our lives trying to be prettier or smarter, but we do need to realize a few things, that those who love us see with their hearts. And I would say even further that we need to see with our hearts and attribute qualities of each one of us beyond what we can see. You know, it's about, we've talked about this before, going past the initial attraction into who that person really is. And so if we're really loved, we don't have to be anything else. We don't have to pretend to be anything else. We can just be authentically who we are. And she said, it's important to leave our imperfections alone. You know, wouldn't it be great to just be loved as who you are? Because there's going to be nicks in the armor. There's going to be parts where you're not exactly the perfect person, especially as we get older. You know, we have our ways of being. And she ends by saying, it's just precious to understand those who can see us, truly see us with their hearts. And it reminds me of the Little Prince. Do you remember the Little Prince who said, to see rightly and truly is to see with the heart? And anyway, I just hope that we can all apply that no matter what's happening in our lives, no matter what circumstances, no matter what political divide, no matter what social unrest, that it's all about love, that we come from love. And as far as LMC Interfaith Ministries, which is the ministry that I founded and lead and sponsors Miracles with a Twist and these podcasts, we also do monthly full moon events out on the beach and here in Fort Lauderdale by the sea. And if anybody happens to be listening or watching before November 14th, that's when we will be doing our next full moon gathering. So in the meantime, we're here and we're rising to the occasion of seeing with eyes of love. We want to pray harder, rise higher, forgive steadily, love readily, and see with eyes of love. So thank you for the opportunity to discuss all of this and so much more, and who knows what's next. But for now, I'll let you go. I know you're going off to a Joe Dispenza retreat. Good for you.
Yes,
You'll have to come back and tell us about that. Maybe that's what we'll talk about next.
Oh gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, it is. So
Podcast.
thank you, and thank everyone who's with us. And the references that we have made today, whether it's A Course in Miracles or the book, the Sue Johnson book, we'll put those links under this video in the comment section. So thank you for now. Bye, and God bless you.